and Touro University. Okay. Touro University in New York City. She holds a PhD in urban studies and public affairs from Cleveland State University. And she currently is an assistant professor of public affairs at the University of Texas, Arlington. Her research, teaching, and activism focus on challenges of housing and homelessness. Dr. Lebovits will speak, and we will have an opportunity for Q&A. Finally, Molly Amster, Director of JUFJ Baltimore, will tell us about JUFJ and its goals in the upcoming Maryland State Legislative Session. Thanks so much to everyone here this evening, in person and virtually, for coming out tonight. Dr. Lebovits.
Hi, everyone. I'm going to try to, can I use this too? With it? Does it switch? Oh, all right.
And if I can make a quick tech note, the webcam is only on Dr. Lebovits, in case you're worried you're on camera. Nobody in the audience is on camera. So.
Jesus was looking at me and I didn't like it. No one else in the room seemed bothered by the cross on the wall, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. It's been years since I first entered the church-based nonprofit ecosystem, and I'm still uncomfortable in explicitly Christian spaces. Every time someone mentions praying or saying grace, I stand there awkwardly, wondering what I'm expected to do, though I've been in that same spot dozens of times. Closer to me than Jesus sat a woman with a distinctly frazzled look. Her face indicated that she was confused, and her lack of materials seemed to reveal that she was unsure what was expected of her that morning. I asked her how she was doing. She was fine, she told me, but uncertain as to whether she would be able to acquire housing. She did not have a personal phone, she explained, and didn't know how she would be able to call landlords and the others involved in the housing process. Recalling Danny's path to this same room, it struck me how odd it was that she was on the same list as him, scheduled to receive her voucher on the same day. Had she been through as many hoops and hurdles as he had? For over 4.5 months, I watched as Danny and those who advocated on his behalf had over 25 interactions with housing agencies, both public and nonprofit, while he followed every step required of him to secure his Section 8 housing choice voucher. I followed his progress through updates from Danny as well as his primary advocate, Linda. In each instance, his advancement through the process was predicated on trust, an emotional and rational bond between the service provider and the recipient. But only Danny's side of the relationship seemed to be committed to the process. Even the voucher that he was set to receive that morning was misrepresented. It would not grant him housing, only the ability to potentially contract with the landlord. His service providers claimed to be protecting his privacy, but they refused to share any interactions with his advocate. I wondered if this professional standard protected them more than him. 138 days after Danny started the process, he was finally given the opportunity to meet with the Dallas County Housing Authority at Catholic Charities Building on Mockingbird Lane. Linda was with him that day, and I joined the two of them with my daughter in tow. She wanted to congratulate Danny. After securing Linda and Danny's approvals, we brought her along. Danny joked at our uncanny resemblance, smiling as he called us twins when we walked by. She sat with us in the second row between Linda and me. Looking around the room, I counted 10 individuals in the audience, 7 Metro relief workers, and 3 people involved in the presentation. It was unclear whether they were employed by Catholic Charities, the Metro Dallas Housing Authority, or Dallas County Housing Authority. An ambiguity that seemed both very banal and significant. I didn't ask my daughter if she noticed Jesus. Perhaps her Jewish day school uniform signaled something within me, and I chose to shield her from this Christian symbolism rather than make a point of referencing it. Instead, we chatted about her snacks and laid out her toys while I watched the presenter struggle with the AV system, which certainly would not have acted up if we had been a room of board members. The time passed, and I noticed that none of the employees seemed very concerned about the time of the audience members. The attendees were all there before 9 in the morning, and they had to bring their correct documentation. And certainly if they had jobs somewhere else, they were giving up day labor work. But no one seemed to really care. No one seemed to apologize. There was no mood lightening levity, no casual conversation. The presenters did look up from the technology to apologize to the case managers, but never to those of us in the audience. We sat there and waited. After the presentation began, we realized that program participants had to document new information in those moments. Misrepresenting one's earnings, we were told several times, could threaten your continued participation in the program. Lying could get you kicked out. The words from the presenter, they elevated the tension in the room, made us feel even more like we didn't matter. We were there for service seeking, but it struck me, hearing her frame the issue, that she believed we were there for lying and deceitful purposes. I worried that perhaps lying itself is what made the difference, that administrative discretion could be used against someone that appeared to be a liar, unworthy of participation in this holy program. As the presentation progressed, I noticed participants were frantically flipping through their information packet, attempting to make sense of a brand new piece of information. The presenters raced through to stay on their schedules, despite the inconvenience to the attendees. The workers chatted amongst themselves, not really helping anyone. And as the time passed, I realized I had to go. After I left, Linda called me up on the phone to let me know what had happened at the end of the meeting. She told me the woman next to me was frantic. The woman told Linda what she had told me and added that she was worried she'd be forced to go back to an abusive boyfriend in order to maintain a roof over her head. Tears streamed down her face as Linda recounted it. Trying to calm her with a hug, Linda alerted the Metro case managers, sitting just a few feet from this woman. Only then did someone come and calm her. I wonder if they felt Jesus watching them too. Good evening, everyone. I'm Hannah Lebovits, and thank you all for being here tonight. I'm not going to be reading most of this from my papers. I just wanted you all to understand the complexity and the humanity of a lot of the work that I do every day, the work that I bring to everything that I do, and the work that I think we need to consider as a Jewish community. So tonight we're going to talk not just about homelessness. Does this work? Does everybody hear me? Hello? Oh, I have to move. Okay. So tonight we're not just going to talk about homelessness, but we're going to talk about why homelessness is more than just about a home. We're going to talk about something called ontological security and what that means as a community, what it means as an Orthodox community, and how we manage boundaries around our own security and other security, boundaries that we don't need to have and that we're sometimes improperly negotiating. This is going to be an intense conversation. So anyone who feels that this is not something that's approachable for them, something that's heavy, I want you to try to sit through it and sit with all of it, because that's really what we're trying to do in this space together. Before I move forward, I do want to note that because we are in sort of a reparative space together, in a relational space together, that I do know that these past couple of weeks have been very difficult for the Orthodox community here in Baltimore. And I want to let people spend this time and also feel that here and feel that relational space that we've created in this community. So what I study is really not homelessness. I don't study homelessness. I study what people need in order to feel a sense of order, cohesion, and safety in their lives. And for many people, it's a home, it's a physical building. But what that home really represents, and why the conversation of this talk is about an Eruv, right, a boundary, what that home really represents is a place. Place making is the most essential nature of a person. We want to be grounded somewhere. It's the reason why we do things like create Eruvim or extend Eruvim, so that people know that where you are and where you're grounded really belongs to something and belongs to somewhere. And that's the nature, okay. That's the nature of the work that I do, is thinking about what people need, how people come to think about the way that they do. I draw very heavily from my Jewish life, my Jewish experience, being a part of the Jewish community. So I want to share a little bit about that for myself. I grew up in an Orthodox community in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And actually my extended family that now lives in Baltimore lives here, my quasi-parents that I grew up with in Pittsburgh. And I grew up in the Orthodox community, a member of the Orthodox community, coming from a family with Hasidic roots back to Hungary, and in a community that I think exemplified what an Eruv can be. A lot of mixture in the community, a lot of different kinds of people in the community. I got to know a lot of people growing up. But I knew that Orthodoxy was separate than other forms of Judaism. And the reason that I knew that was through institutions that I was affiliated with, right? I went to a Jewish day school. Other Jews didn't necessarily go to a Jewish day school. I went to a specific kind of Jewish day school. Non-Orthodox Jews didn't necessarily go there. I went to a certain kind of shul that was Orthodox. That's how I came to understand what Orthodoxy was. But as I grew as a Jew, I came to recognize that Jewish life and Jewish experience for many people is not filtered through institutions. It's filtered through relationships, filtered through community, filtered through a sense of identity and relationship with God. However, we still maintain these institutional systems and these institutional networks, and particularly in Orthodoxy, we are marked by a density of institutions, right? They're in the Orthodox community, we're constantly supporting institutions, we're funding institutions, we're bringing new institutions in. And so what happens is that our sense of safety, our sense of cohesion, our sense of order, we've sort of externalized it to these institutions. We're expecting institutions to help us understand what is safe, what is good, what is secure. And that's why when our institutions fail, we're so fundamentally shaken inside because we're looking to them for that guidance. We're looking to them to house those values. It's not just a physical home, it's a value-based home. It's something that I know I'm safe here, I feel good here. And when I was growing up as an Orthodox Jew, I was very exposed to many other Jews, but I never felt a sense of connection to them that went beyond those institutions. Ultimately, at the end of the day, I didn't go to school with these kids. I didn't pray with these kids. I couldn't spend time with these kids. And so what happened to me was I created my own sort of Eruv. I created my own insularity through my identity, through my institutional network, through the ways that I work through my life every single day. I started to get a sense of who I was and how I was different. And every time that other Jewish people or other people stepped into my life, it was through that framing. If you ask my daughter, I'm raising my children in the Orthodox community and myself still raising in the Orthodox community in Dallas. If you ask my daughter where her neighborhood is, she will tell you from our house to the shul, from our house to the school, from our house to her other Orthodox friends. Our sense of place, our sense of self is so very much defined. Our spatial cognition is so very much defined by these institutions. And when these institutions dictate priorities, we take in a lot of that too. We take in that sense. When we're sitting in that Catholic Charities building waiting to get our voucher and we're being told that we're liars, that we're deceitful, that we're really trying to game the system by the people who are there to help us, we internalize that. And I hope that for many of you, when you were hearing me read that, it felt very dehumanizing, right? It felt like there are these things that are being sort of brought onto you. You are not embodying these, but you're being told to embody these feelings. And that's a dehumanizing way that we strip people of their agency. And so sometimes our institutions, they do that. And we need to step back a little bit and we need to think about who are we as Orthodox Jews, who are we as an Orthodox community beyond our institutions. So what I want to challenge you to think about today, and as we talk a little bit more about progressive advocacy and this space and this work, is to challenge this idea that we can externalize and contract out our values to institutions. That in fact, we actually have to take control of our institutions. We have to take control of our values. We have to take control of where these things go and actually bring them back to who we are. So who are we? What is the Jewish community like when it comes to advocacy, when it comes to social issues? Well, we have actually a very, very long tradition of engaging in social work and social advocacy. And it's not the same as what we call it today, because broadly for generations, for thousands of years, the work that Jews have done, that they still continue to do for social advocacy and social work, has been focused on the Jewish community, right? A lot of support systems. You have them here in Baltimore. I mean, it's incredible. It's amazing. The support networks that Jews create for themselves. Historically, biblically, we have Jewish support networks constantly being created and recreated. Jews have to go from one place to another. They don't go by themselves. They go with a whole group. They need all of these people. They need community. Community is constantly being recreated. How? Through these tension points. So something happens, we now have to reconsider who we are, reconsider where we live, reconsider what we do, and we shift. And we go from that biblically to the prophet era, to all of these changes that we have through Judaism. How are Jews still alive today? Because every single time there's a tension point, we take that as an opportunity to reconstitute community. And in fact, community is built out of these tension points. So when we engage with a tension point, when we see these, how do Jews historically react? Well, we usually react immediately by taking care of our own. We create support networks for our own. We create what's called Landsmannschaft in Europe. It was a system of networks that was essentially what we call today mutual aid. People who were in different fields, people who were in different neighborhoods, different things, they would take care of each other. They had this sense of being concerned about each other and worried about each other. And that part of their responsibility in their Jewish identity was to take care of each other. And I've done a lot of research on this topic. I really don't want to bore you with all of it because it's boring ultimately. Don't read academic papers. They're not good. They're not worth reading. But what it draws out over and over again is very specific ways that we do this. So one way that we do this is through what's called mutual aid. But that's really a system of mutual accountability. There's two other major ways that we do a lot of this work. And so what I'm secretly doing is giving you all like an academic lecture, but I'm doing it in a way that sounds nice and good and approachable. But mutual accountability is one way that we create these systems of networks and support systems. But there's two other ways. One other way is access. We create pathways to access for people. We recognize when someone doesn't have something and we say, we need that. We need to make that. We don't have housing. Someone needs to get going with housing. Someone needs this support system. We need to start that. We need that nonprofit. Our schools need to start doing that. We're very good at access. We create these systems of access. But while we have access and we have mutual accountability, one thing we struggle with is acquisition. Going from that point where we say we're all friends, we all know each other, we're going to get it, we're going to make it happen, we're going to bring these things. We don't have them. We still struggle with acquiring them. And that's why very often we lose people, or that's why very often we can't fill that need, because even though we're accountable, we're accessible, we're not making it work, we're not bringing it together. And historically, this has been a struggle for a lot of Jewish communities to find that acquisition point. How do we make sure everyone gets it? How do we make sure that the most vulnerable people are the first ones to be able to get help, not the last ones, right? The easy folks, they can hang around for a couple more weeks. They're fine. These people need to get services right now. We haven't figured out yet how to do that. And the Jews that I interviewed today, which I've gone across the country, I've been to many different Jewish communities, I've been to many different Jewish spaces. Jews today, they're recognizing that acquisition issue. They're recognizing that who's the priority here? Where are our priorities? Are we setting people up in the right spaces? Are we preparing them to do what they need to do? And we're focusing on that a lot more. But where we're not thinking about it is how we as Jewish people are actually exemplars for other communities too. And we're needed in those communities. And why do I repeat that? We are needed in those communities. I've been in those communities. I'm out in those communities all the time. And let me tell you, they'll give you a Bible before they'll give you a plate. Okay? What they're looking for is not what we are. It's not what Jewish communities are. We feed people, they walk into our house, we feed people, we don't even know who they are. And we're already feeding them. We don't ask anything, we don't require anything. Even in our communal institutions that are within the Orthodox community, we see a lot of growth, a lot of potential in people. We take small children from the time that they're 6 months old until they're 18, and we dedicate ourselves to educating them because we see their potential. And what's happening on the streets now, and when I say on the streets, I mean just outside, what's happening around, the people who now have the power to do this kind of work, they're doing it wrong. They're doing it with the wrong perspectives. They're doing it with the wrong goals. They're saving souls by torturing bodies. And I see it every single day. And the reason I'm trying to say it this way is because I want you to feel compelled to understand that even if you can't do something, what's happening out there is a massacre. It is a crisis. There are people who need you. There are people who need your understanding of the fact that every human life is deserving. And I want to read something else for you all, because I want to really drive this home. On September 11th, 2021, Lonnie Lewis was remembered by his family and friends at a small ceremony. His online tribute wall, a page on a local funeral home's website, revealed a man who was deeply loved and missed, even before he died on the streets. "I'm sorry we weren't in touch after Dot's passing all those years ago," one relative wrote. "I assumed you were continuing on with life as we all were. I had no idea the things you were going through." Another recalled that, "In my early years, this man taught me everything. I wanted to do everything he did." Friends posted their own messages, sharing his light and his smile with the world. "We're missing him bad," one exclaimed, as if in this medium, the capitalization, the exclamation points could capture who this man was. On the streets of Dallas, Lonnie's life was shaped by how public he was. He was just known as a street name. As an unhoused resident, he was always monitored. He was always seen by other people, but never understood. Only in his death were the people closest to him concerned. Lonnie's death happened shortly before I left town for a few weeks, but it was on Bobby's mind when I came to visit him after I got back. He told me of another death that I had missed at the time, during the time I was away, which seemed like more intentional violence against a homeless transgender woman. Lonnie's death was senseless and random, though it had a similarly predictable nature to it, at least according to Bobby's retellings. As Bobby explained it, the gun that killed Lonnie was triggered by homeless bashing, a terminology many people on the street use to describe what housed people do when they come to the streets to be violent against those who are homeless. The people who engage in this violence are not volunteers or outreach professionals, and they're not fellow unhoused individuals. These people come from outside the area. Lonnie's murderer was an outsider. The external predator narrative is very common and constantly repeated by people experiencing homelessness and has been proven over and over again in police reports. But the narrative of unwelcome outsiders is very often pushed upon them. They are seen as the people likely to be violent. However, it's really the opposite that's true. When I heard he had died, I tried to remember if Lonnie and I had ever met. Many people passed through H Street, especially when Bobby was grilling or otherwise entertaining. But my bandwidth was not always incredibly high, and I couldn't speak to everyone there all the time. I looked at Lonnie's picture and I believed that I had met him because it certainly felt that I must have. His face reacted to, and my face reacted to his warm smile. I smiled back at the image. I missed the service, but I dedicated a tree on his behalf. According to those who witnessed the event, as well as the Dallas police reports, Lonnie's death began at around 2:45 in the morning when the homeless bashing incident occurred. Someone within the vicinity shot a bullet into the air, which ricocheted off of the bridge and hit Lonnie directly in the arm. He needed immediate medical attention. The C Street encampment, where Lonnie lived, was just steps away from the Austin Street homeless shelter and a couple hundred yards from the Dallas Police Department Patrol Division. Still, no one responded to the call. 6 hours later, when the police department arrived at 8:45 in the morning, Lonnie was dead. Local Dallas news outlets reported the shooting with a short description of a murder at a homeless encampment and the contact information for the police department. No mention of the eyewitness accounts or the timing of the shooting. I contacted DPD to request additional information about the case and was told that the police report could not be shared and additional investigative information could not be accessed. Months later, the records were finally released, revealing that a suspected perpetrator did come from the outside and was arrested 8 months later. "They let him bleed out, man," Bobby recalled. "They let him bleed out." The reason I share these things is I want people to recognize their own humanity and our humanity, because yes, we live in a community that's built by our institutional density and by servicing our own needs, and it's incredible and it's amazing. But there is a world that needs us. There is a world that requires us to be a light on the nations, which historically has been the second level of social support and advocacy that Orthodox Jews have promoted. This light, this sense of ethics. If you look at the Torah, if you look at the biblical backings of our Jewish life and where we come from, we see systems of ethics, systems of courts, systems of judgment that set up this order and this cohesion that people are searching for, setting up this ontological security through ways of understanding, of kindness, of care, but of judgment, right? And of recognition of human life. And what's happening out on the streets, what's happening out in everywhere, Every community has this issue. It doesn't only exist in Baltimore, it doesn't only exist in DC, it doesn't only exist in LA, it's happening everywhere. Is we have this lack of security that so many people are constantly experiencing. And they're not experiencing it from their own decision-making. They're experiencing it by being constantly maligned and ignored and not seen. And so even though they're not in our community here, they are in our community as people. They are who we are. They are deeply connected in our souls. So I want to talk a little bit more about boundaries, because I think the ways that we think about boundaries is what impacts our understanding of the lines that we create. I am going to stop in a little bit for questions. So if you have one, just hold on to it for a minute. So there are several different components of boundaries, boundary making, boundary seeking, and what we call borderlands. So the first, now my papers got all mixed up. So the first element of boundary seeking, it comes from this sense of cohesion. People want to feel like the pieces of their life fit together. That's why we create boundaries, so that we know, where does the city end? Where does the Eruv end? Where does my community end? What does orthodoxy mean? Right? Can you be Orthodox if you don't do X, Y, Z? We need this sense of cohesion. We need this sense of understanding. The second thing that we do with boundaries is we create comparatives. We create comparisons. We see our own community in one way, and we see other communities in a different way. The third thing that we do with boundaries is we create questions. Where do these boundaries end? Where do these boundaries go until? A person who's homeless in Dallas, how do I feel about them? How am I supposed to feel about that? What am I supposed to care about? Who am I supposed to care about? I don't have enough energy to care about everybody. It creates a lot of questions in our minds. The fourth concept that we have to think about in boundaries is maintenance. How do we maintain our boundaries? And are we maintaining them well? And I want you all to think about something that is at the core of a lot of what we do in our community when we make community. And it's the fact that every border implies the violence of its maintenance. Every border implies the violence of its maintenance. Every time you set up an end space, this is where it stops. The implication is that there's something violent necessary in order to keep it there. Is it physical violence? Not always. Sometimes it's emotional violence, it's programmatic violence, it's institutional violence, it's religious violence, all of these forms of violence. But we need that strength, we need that violence to maintain that boundary. And it doesn't just happen in ways to keep people from being able to access things. Sometimes that violence can be used, and we do talk about this idea in Judaism that whatever trait you have, you can filter it through the correct lens. Oftentimes we can use that violence to be violent about the right things, to not stand down when someone says, you don't need to talk about this. We don't need to be worried about this. We can present our violence to say, no, that's not where our boundary is. Our boundary is beyond that. Our boundary focuses on safety and communal support systems, and we will not stop at, no, we're not going to talk about this. We need that violence sometimes to push that boundary, to find where that boundary actually is. Finally, when we think about boundaries, we also have to think about borderlands, the space around the boundaries. Where can we make some differences? Where can we reshape a lot of what we do or how we think so that we can just get to the next step? We're not going to solve everything today, but maybe we can solve a little bit more than what we've already had figured out. When we look at all of those pieces together, I think that there is a lot of space within our Orthodox community, and certainly the folks who I interview believe that there is. But we need to recognize that when we talk about these changes, when we talk about getting into this work, we're coming up against a much stronger boundary that wants to keep people from doing anything, while simultaneously a much looser boundary that's allowing us to have networks and new understandings. And a lot of the balance of Orthodoxy is between that harsh stop and that constant flow, right? We have to constantly be figuring out, where do we stop, but what do we let in? And what do we reconceptualize? Almost like a cell, like biologically, right? We have to let some things in because we need that for our maintenance, but we also need to have cell boundaries, and we need to communicate from the boundaries inside. And I want to challenge you all to think about, rather than communicating from the inside to the borderlands, to the boundaries, why don't we consider communicating from the boundaries to the inside? Instead of beginning with the people who are most privileged, who have the most power, and who already have their ideas and their understanding recognized. Let's start from the margins. Let's start from the people who don't have that, from the people who haven't yet been given the chance to conceptualize where we're at as a community. And let's take our ideas from the border and bring them inside, because at the border where those people are standing, they can see beyond what we can see. They can see what's happening, they can see what's coming up, and they understand where we're going and how we're moving. And again, biologically, that's how we operate. We operate from the boundaries of the cell inside. Sorry, normally do you hear me? Okay. In my classroom at UT Arlington, I actually have a piano in my classroom. For whatever reason, I teach in a music school. That's where my class is located. And so very often when I hit like a really intense point, I just want everybody to like think about it. I'm like on the piano. But fortunately, you all could not plan well enough. I know, I'm sorry. Oh, there is a piano over there. I know. So you can imagine that I am pressing on the piano. But I want you all to sit with this, and I want you to think about this, because I think the people in this room are likely the people who are on the boundaries, right? The people who came out here, the people who are interested in this topic, who want to talk about this, they're likely the folks who are already on the boundaries. And part of what I want you all to recognize is you're empowered in that space. You have agency in that space. And I think over the last several years, there's been this sense from a lot of folks who are on these borderlands that they're losing that power, or that they never had that power, or they're looking around and they're saying, well, nobody's going to support what I want to do, or nobody's interested in this kind of work, or things like that. But I don't think that that's true. I think that you have power. I think you have the ability to say, I'm at that border and I want to tell you what's coming up next, because if you don't see this, you're not as healthy as you can be. You're not going to be as sustainable as you can be. You're not going to thrive as a community. But the difficulty, and I want to be very honest, the difficulty is that if you are a boundary man, if you are somebody at the edge, you will never be in the middle. And that is the reality. You will never be socially acceptable in the way those people right front and center are. You just won't be. And you have to be ready for the fight, and you have to be ready to constantly push, because you will never be mainstream, because you're a boundary person. And you're going to have to be a boundary spanner. You're going to be a boundary spanner your whole life, because guess what? That's your bucket. That's what you have. That's why you're here. And that's why you have to connect with other boundary people and support each other, because you are powerful and you are capable. And you all will do incredible things and can do incredible things because you stand on the boundary. And that is in and of itself a benefit to the community. Communities are strongest because of their tensions. Institutions are strong because of their tensions. An institution that today in 2022 is doing the same exact thing that it did in 1915 is killing all of its people because the building is full of asbestos and there is no air conditioning. Okay? It's not healthy. It's not where we want to be. This constant progress, the people who move things from the boundaries, they're the people who create change. They're the people who save lives. They are the people who do this work. But they will never, and you will never, be mainstream. There will never be a mainstream Orthodox social justice community, ever, anywhere. I don't care what Silver Spring thinks they are. It just won't happen. It isn't true, because you have to be a boundary person. You have to be willing to be standing on that boundary, because what you can do on that boundary is you can be a bridge. And instead of being a barrier, you can create connections and you can bring new information in, and you can stand for something and not shift. You will stand for something that other people know they're supposed to stand for, even when they don't do it. I'm on the interwebs quite a bit. Not as much as some people here, not to call one out, but there are some people who are on the internet more than I am. And I spend a lot of time there, and I spend a lot of time talking about a lot of communal issues. And I think anybody who does this work gets yelled at in public, and everyone says you're terrible and you're the worst. But do you know how many people so often DM me, they send me a message and they say, hey, thanks for talking about this. And the reason it's so important for me to hear it is because I was in this situation, or I'm struggling with that and that. And you know what? The folks who are yelling at me, they're never going to hear those stories. They're never going to know what's really happening in our community. They're never going to be able to get to that acquisition point, to get the people what they actually need, because they're not at the edge of the cell. They're not sending signals. They're the ones who are right smack in the middle, like mitochondriaing it up, like we're good, everything's fine. They're not getting the signals. They're not seeing things. And so the folks on the boundaries have to stay on the boundaries. You have to stay there. Even when everyone tells you it's terrible and it's horrible, and even when your neighbor says blah, 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 you're full of blah, 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 one day your neighbor is going to come to you and they are going to say, I remember 10 years ago, you talked about that, and now I need to talk to you about it too. And that's what we have to do, and we cannot let up, and you have to keep going and keep going and keep going and never stop. And it is exhausting. Get some sleep, please, people. Start going to bed before 10 or your bodies are not going to work out. It is exhausting. You need to physically rehabilitate yourself over and over again. We have Shabbos, which is great, but I kind of feel like Shabbos is the most tense day of the week, but okay. We get a little bit of rest. We build that into our social support system. But you know what we need to do for ourselves? We need to do the same thing we want to do for our community. We need to engage in caretaking with each other. And I want everyone who's in this space or who knows someone in this space, because I know every single person in this space knows 5 other people who need to hear this or who should be in this space or who are thinking about this space. I want you all to recognize that what you essentially have to do is take care of one another. Bring in others, bring a bridge, be a bridge with other groups, create coalitions, because you can't do it alone and you're never going to not be able to do it. So you might as well do it well, right? You can't do it. Can't do it. You can't keep doing every day. I have to log out of Twitter sometimes because you can't, but you have to log out and you have to go do something fun and then come back and keep fighting because it's done. It's over for you. You're never going to be normal. I'm sorry. It's not going to happen. It's just not. It's done. That ship has sailed. But what you are going to be is powerful. And if you get organized and if you take care of one another, and if you do the same thing that you want your community to do for you, for yourselves and for each other, you can be very strong and you can create a lot of change, especially in a community like this, where I think right now, unfortunately, it's an opportune time for a lot of conversations to be brought up, for a lot of things to be pushed. And there's going to be people who are going to say, we tried hard enough. We did the thing. Why aren't you happy? And the answer is because you have to push harder. Because every single time, 1915 passed, but now it's 1920, and now it's 1930, and we need to keep pushing and we need to keep going. And that is what the progressive advocacy means. It means we don't stop. It means that we recognize that this might be where the wall is and where the barrier is and where the boundary is right now, but I'm at the boundary. And I'm telling you that there's more warriors coming in that way. And we need to keep going. And I'm telling you that I can see from up here what is happening. And I'm shining the light over here so that someone else shines the light over there. And then the whole Great Wall of China lights up and tells everybody what's going on. That is what your role is. That is what being a boundary spanner is. That's what being a boundary stander is. You have to keep pushing. That's what progressive advocacy is. I want to give everybody some time for questions, right? That's okay. Awesome. You can ask me about myself. You can ask me about my work. You can ask me about this idea, but what I really, really want for you all is this was a little bit of like a head fake, right? You're like, oh, you're talking about housing, you're talking about homelessness, blah, blah, blah. What I'm really here to do is empower you, because I do believe that there is a space for progressive advocacy in Orthodox Judaism. I believe it is at our core. And I believe that our history of doing this work has been done by exactly the people in this room. We don't talk about it that way, but I believe that every single person who is critically involved in creating social support systems for Orthodox communities has been somebody who was like almost going to get kicked out of shul, or the rabbi who was almost going to be whatever. And now they're amazing, incredible rabbi, because look at what they stood up for and look at what they created. And so I want you all to think of yourselves, every single one of you, as being that person who right now, today, you're on the edges. But in history, when we look back, you're going to be remembered as the person who kept pushing and who did not let up. And so what I'm really here for is not to talk about housing and homelessness, but it's good old chizuk. I am really here to give you all the strength and support to continue doing what you're doing, because again, you're not going to be mainstream. It's done. It's over for you all. It's not happening. So the best you can do is lean into who you are and keep pushing. Thank you. Anyone have any questions? Any questions about anything? Come on, I'll just start picking on people. That's what I do in school. Terrible.
Okay,
The worst.
we have a Zoom test.
Oh, amazing. Huzzah.
So Molly's getting the questions from the moderator, but she'll read them.
Okay.
Okay, so the question is, how can we as a community support the homeless who feel abandoned by other people who are in positions of power to actually do something?
I love that question. Okay.
Could you
So,
repeat the question?
yes. Okay. So here was the question for everybody. I'm going to use okay. So here's the question. Hello. Okay. Here's the question. The question is, how can we as a Jewish community support people who are experiencing homelessness or help them when other systems have failed? And it is a great question because there are many things that you can do. The first thing, the absolute first thing, is that if you hear, actually, you shouldn't wait to hear about it. You should go look at your city planning schedule and see when there is affordable housing, mixed-use housing, workforce housing, or a homeless shelter being built somewhere. And show up at that meeting and say, I am a Baltimore resident and this is needed here. This is necessary. I have seen this happen so many times. It is just about bodies in the room. City councils, city planning commissions, they will say no to these projects because 5 people showed up for their neighborhood and said, we don't want this, we don't need this, blah, 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 blah. And if you have 12 people who show up and they say, we want this, they will pass it. Like city governing is not as intense as people think it is. It's literally people just saying, yeah, okay, show up. Support more housing being built. It is good for our community. It is good for other communities. It is good, period, to have more housing that is more affordable. And when we talk about affordability in a place like Baltimore, we're not talking about like social housing. Like we're not even necessarily talking about housing for the poorest group. We're talking about housing for people who are nurses, teachers, folks like that. But how housing works is that there's a filtering mechanism. The more housing that exists in general, the more likely you're going to have what we call naturally affordable housing. That's the very low income housing. That's still safe and still quality housing for those folks on the edges. And it's those folks who end up homeless. I mean, I could tell you every single story. I could read you millions of narratives of folks who I have met and spoken to. People in many of these neighborhoods where there is naturally affordable housing, they are getting kicked out, they are getting evicted, so that that building can then be gentrified into a more expensive building. And the more buildings we have, the less likely that is going to happen. Like it's a clear supply demand issue, and we do not have enough housing. So the number one thing is that if you want to help people who are experiencing homelessness, you need to show up and you need to support more housing being built. It is good. It is good for everyone. It will also help. First of all, just a general thing that people sort of think, do more apartments impact single family home housing values? No, they don't. In fact, every single study has shown single family housing works on a different projection than apartment buildings. More apartment buildings in your neighborhood does not create less housing value for your single family home. It is a more sticky market for single family homes. What it does is it gives people more options for more housing. So that's the first thing. The second thing to do is to talk to your legislators and tell them that you care about this community. Again, it is really not as intense as people think it is. It is just down to the fact that a lot of people think no one cares. I have spoken to legislators who have told me clearly, and this is not just in Dallas, in a lot of places, that everyone hates the homeless and we just need to get rid of them. And if you show up and if you say, I care about these people, I want these people to get help, I want us to have more support systems, all of that sort of stuff, it will be helpful. On the macro level, like on the larger level, we need institutions that separate religion from service delivery. And I know it's a big problem here in Baltimore because I know the churches are out there doing their stuff. And what they're doing, and they're incentivized to do this, is to make people come back every single day. They don't sign them up for the systems that they need, for the programs that they need. They say, you don't need food stamps, you don't need SNAP, just come back here tomorrow, give you more food. That keeps people on the streets. It keeps people from getting the systems that they need and they deserve to be self-sufficient. And it's very manipulative and it's very exploitative because the federal government contracts with churches to do this work with faith-based organizations. So they're getting money to do all of this. And if there's one thing that should be done for this community, it is tzedakah the way that the Torah and the Rambam say we're supposed to do tzedakah. It is truly giving from a place of recognizing that I'm not giving to you because, oh, I've decided you're worthy. Like, oh, I'm giving to you because I need to do it. I need to give tzedakah because it makes me a better person. It's not because I think you're worthy, you're deserving, and like, oh, you're a mom and you have 2 kids. Oh, that's so sad. No, it's because we need to be better people. That is why we give tzedakah. That's what the Torah explains about all of this work. We do it because it makes us better people. And what we need are more organizations who do that work. And we have amazing Jewish organizations that do this work for the Jewish community. There are many people in Baltimore who've experienced housing insecurity, and Jewish organizations have assisted them without exploitation, without any sort of, well, how religious are you? And are you going to show up at services every single, like, can you imagine that? Really, like, can you imagine walking into a Jewish family service organization and saying, hey, I need help. And then being like, which synagogue were you at last week? We're going to check with the rabbi on that one before you can come in here. That's what these organizations do. And we need to, they do it here. They check which synagogue you go to.
There are places you have to get an okay from a rabbi to get them.
So that's wrong. Like, I'm just going to say that it is wrong. And it is not in line with Torah, which says you don't have to do any of that. In fact, the halachos according to Rambam are very clear. The laws are very clear. You don't even determine how much they need. The person who's asking gets to determine what they need and what they want. And the best way to help somebody is through grant, is through giving them something and saying, I am investing in you, all of you. And it helps make me a better person. And I think it's wrong if they're doing that. You can tell them I said that. Send them after me. Everyone's after me anyway already. You can send them after me. Tell them that it is wrong. And for those of you standing on the boundaries, standing on the borderlands, stand up against that. Because you should not have to attend services in order to get help. That is not a Jewish value, right? And so I want everybody here to feel that you have power. There are things you can do. And the biggest thing, really the most fundamental thing, is to educate people. To educate people. Because I've had these conversations with folks. Oh, the homeless are this, oh, that, blah, blah, blah. Just say, hey, you know what? First of all, most people are 1 paycheck away from homelessness. If you really didn't have a social support system and you lost your job, you are 1 paycheck away from homelessness. A lot of people are 1 spouse's paycheck away from homelessness. Their spouse lost their job, their spouse passed away. A lot of people are 1 step away from depression, mental illness, anxiety. A lot of people are right there. And a lot of people are not as secure as they like to think they are. And that's why we look at people who are openly insecure and say, that's them, that's not us. We're fine, we're good. I mean, sorry for them, but I'm okay. You're not okay. Nobody's okay. That's why we need each other. That's why we have community. That's why you show up at services if you come to them, because you're not okay. And you need people. I think we need to educate people to understand what this condition really is, what it's experienced like, and what it feels like to try to go and get help. Because I think that's what people think. Well, if they actually wanted help, they could just go get help. But getting help is very difficult. Calling the cops and having no one show up is very difficult. Makes it very difficult to get help once you're dead. Going somewhere and being dehumanized makes it very difficult to feel that you can get help. Because you have to give up your agency. You have to give up your sense of self. And I meet people every single day that the city of Dallas calls service resistant. These people are service resistant. They don't want services. Let me tell you, services are people resistant. They suck. They're terrible. I would never walk into a shelter for a night unless I do it for research. They're horrible. They're very difficult places to be. They're dysfunctional. They're dirty. You're with a whole bunch of people you don't know. Can you imagine being packed into a gymnasium all night and locked, the doors are locked, with 300 other people you never met in your life? That in of itself is horrifying. I'd rather sleep in a tent under a bridge than go in there. Services are people resistant. And we need to talk about that, and we need to educate other people to know that what these folks experience is never something you would ever want to experience in your life. Have compassion, have pity, have empathy, and say something. Yes.
I have a fair amount of experience with the social service delivery system outside of the Jewish community here in Baltimore. And I have to take objection to most of what you said about
Okay.
the quality and approach of many of both faith-based and government-sponsored or independent nonprofit organizations. It's just not my experience in Baltimore. So
That's amazing too. So did everyone hear that? You're saying that the experience here in Baltimore with faith-based and government agencies has been great. I think that's amazing to hear. I mean, I don't think that sometimes we think that it's either good or bad. Like there are successes in these systems. I think the problem is with most cases that they're the most vulnerable people. That's where the problem is, right? The people who are chronically homeless, who are in and out very often, who are like would take 80% of the work to get help for. Those are the folks who are falling through.
So I run an organization that wants to be the largest homeless shelters in both counties surrounding us. And people are treated with great dignity and respect. The shelters are clean, are safe.
That's amazing. So you're an exemplar.
Well,
So then we need to do more of what you are everywhere.
Here in Baltimore, and I don't know anything about Dallas, your ecosystem, support services, but I want the community here to know that the Baltimore community does better than the.
That's amazing. I think that's incredible. So then stand up for more of that, right? Encourage more of that. Encourage building more shelters. Encourage getting more done.
Welcome anyone to help me do that.
That's awesome. That's
Every
great.
day, 365 days a year. but
That's great. That's awesome. So then you are an exemplar, right? You are in an ecosystem.
nothing special. Anybody-
The agencies the work that you're doing, and I want to assume it's informed by your Jewish values. The work that you are doing, right, is an exemplar for other organizations and for other places, because in the larger ecosystem, it's not like that.
I welcome you to come visit.
That's awesome. Thank you. And everyone should get involved. Yes.
Right. Migration. And both forms are honored. The patient has never made a complaint. Certainly not about me, but not about Baltimore City and how they're treated. They get a form.
That's amazing.
They get form 500 and they get some money. And no, there are many churches here, and I have not had one patient ever, and I have a couple of thousand, ever tell me they were required to go to church. No.
That's
they didn't,
amazing.
because I work on the other side. I don't have the family. But this is nothing to do with my experience in Baltimore City.
That's incredible.
No, it's not. This is Baltimore City has a lot of compassion, but maybe the administration has some lacks as we focus on the harbor. But when it comes down to meeting people's needs, getting them transportation, getting them subsidies, getting them housing, my patients are not turned away, and they're definitely needy folks.
That's wonderful.
But it's typical.
I'm just gonna repeat for the folks on Zoom that you were saying that in your experience, people have gotten, have gotten a lot of services and.
Not only not people turned down, but very pleased. And they get renewals on this.
That's amazing. So we need more organizations like yours, right? And when that's wonderful. And so we need more of that. That's great.
So freely doing, I don't see the reason it's effective. I just don't.
I think that's incredible. I mean, I know that I have heard stories from like all over this area of things like that happening, right? And each person has their own individual experience. I think it's wonderful that you're right on there, you're doing that work and it's there and you can see it. And we need to scale it up, right? So that it's a question of scale. We know what we have to do. We have to keep scaling. We have to get more people involved. We have to do more of this work. We need more shelters that are safe places for people to go to, right? We need more of this. We just have to scale, right? If we have the solutions, we need to get going. You need more people involved, right? More people to be there. more people to recognize that we can do this. We can have solutions. That's what everyone's looking for. Where are the solutions? We can find them. We need to scale them up. We need to keep going. We need to move forward. Anyone else?
I'm gonna move the mic. We're just using the mic for everyone here, but also for the people who are online, make sure they can hear.
Hi, I am such a big fan of yours. And hi, everybody. My name is Rebecca. I'm here as a good old regular progressive Jew, but also as I'm the Jewish liaison for the mayor's office and liaison for Northwest. Some folks in the room here, along with myself, are coming from another event that was addressing the bridging the cultural divides and the long-term segregation and everything of this area of Park Heights, the One Park Heights initiative. We were just at an oral history event. And my question to you is like big picture about interfaith organizing, which I've experienced to varying degrees of success, interracial organizing, work within the Jewish community, work among denominations with Jewish communities, and also how showing up in other interfaith spaces. I don't really have a question. I just wanted to know, your thoughts on speaking to how all of that. Yeah, what are your thoughts on all that?
I mean, I think there's so much potential, right? Like I would not stand here and talk about this if there wasn't potential. Years ago, when I started getting into this work, I would have left it. I would have been done. I would have said, there's nothing to do here, so let's just stop. I think there's potential. I think that it needs to come from Jewish values. That's what I want. I want to see more Jews who already embody this sense of dignity, support, our sense of charity, not coming from a perspective of like deservingness and worthiness, but rather of it coming from our own betterment. That when we do this work, we are better people, and not that there's, something that other folks are like, oh, us, or, this deceit or this sense of lying or worthiness or judgment, things like that. I just want more Jews who already have this. We already have it. Just go and do it. And when we're in interfaith spaces, like be really Jewish, stand for the Jewish values, stand for what you stand for. Because I don't think that the reason why, I don't think that these are cruel people. I don't think they're cruel actors. I don't think that it's coming from a place of intentional like badness, but I think it's coming from a place where you have a different value system, where you approach things in a different lens. There's a reason why we need interfaith coalitions, because we need Jews. And instead of like minimizing our Jewishness or minimizing our Jewish values or minimizing the Jewish perspective, push for the Jewish perspective, because I think that's a big part of this conversation. So that's what I wish that I could see more of. I mean, certainly I've been in a lot of different cities. I haven't done hard research here in Baltimore, but I've been in a lot of places. And I think that Jews are a benefit. Jews in the room, Jews talking about Jewish values, Jews showing up and doing social work, Jews doing this work instead of sort of like hiding or like pretending our Jewishness isn't there. And we do it so strongly in Orthodoxy and through an Orthodox lens and with our Orthodox institutions. But then sometimes we show up somewhere and we're like, oh, I don't want to get too Jewish on everyone, or, I don't want to talk about the fact that it's kind of weird that like we're in this place that's supposed to embody this caretaking value and none of us are being taken care of here. Like avoiding that and saying it and speaking our Jewish values right up front and center.
So we are supposed to transition, but there was a great question. I choose the mic.
Sure.
Sorry. So I really just want to cut into the next part because I want you to answer this next question, which is any suggestions on how to pull someone to the edge with you?
Ooh. Okay, I love that question. So the first thing is that a lot of people are already on the edge, but they don't realize it because they're still hoping that they can be mainstream, and they can't. And sometimes you have to be that friend that's like, sweetie, no, it's not gonna work for you. You're already there. You're already on the edge. You've already dedicated your life to this work. It already happened. So sometimes it's just about making your friends aware that they're already on the edge. But I think we also have to recognize that not everyone needs to be or should be pulled all the way to the edge. Sometimes we can just pull people a little bit closer to where we are, and they're not ready or they're not meant to be on that edge, but it's okay for them to just be a little bit closer to you. And certainly in states like Texas, this is like a big concern because we have a lot of, there's like a narrative gap in how we talk about a lot of the work that we do. Folks that are at the edge are talking about things in certain kinds of ways with using a lot of language that folks who are in the center, who are mainstream, who are in the middle, it turns them off a lot. And so sometimes we don't have to get people all the way to the edge. We don't have to get them to think about, we don't have to get them to constantly use terms like structural racism, but we need to get them to be able to identify that, certain groups have experienced and have been like placed within experiences against their will that have led them into certain situations. And we don't have to use all the same language. We don't have to use all of the same understanding, but we can bring them a little bit further. But the biggest one is letting your friends know that they're already on the edge. Like friends let friends know that they're already on the edge.
Okay. Trying to pay attention to the people on there and turn this on. So I'm Molly Amster. I'm the Baltimore Director and Maryland Policy Director for Jews United for Justice. JFJ was started in Washington, D.C. in, I don't remember what year, but it's almost 25 years ago. And it was started by people who were really inspired by Jewish teaching and by the work of Rabbi Heschel in particular, and wanting to see people doing the work of making the place where they live, right in Washington, D.C., more just. And a lot of what we just heard was about, what our Jewish values tell us about the dignity of humans and the divinity in each person. And in JUFJ, we are really working in partnership with people who are resisting their own marginalization. We're working in collaboration, in solidarity, and in coalition spaces. So I wanted to tell you a bit about the work we're doing. We don't do a ton on homelessness directly. Some of what we heard tonight was about direct services. What we're trying to do is change policy to get at the root causes of homelessness and other things that really make people suffer. So we do a lot of work on renters' rights, preventing eviction in particular, both at the city level and at the state level. Here in Baltimore, we're part of the Baltimore Renters United Coalition, where folks are working on housing conditions, are working on skyrocketing rents, and are working on preventing people from being evicted by making sure that the services that are available, like rental assistance to keep people housed, actually gets to people, actually prevents them from being evicted rather than waiting and waiting while they get evicted. And at the state level, this coming January, the legislative session starts mid-January and runs through mid-April. We'll be working with our partners at Renters United Maryland on similarly trying to ensure that there's rental assistance dollars available for people, because those funds are quickly running out, even with the huge amounts of money people got from the federal government around to keep people housed during the pandemic. And we're also going to be working on making sure that people are not kicked out of their homes, even when their landlords are illegally renting their homes and are maintaining really terrible conditions for people to live in. We work on several other issues around, and we'll be prioritizing in Annapolis this year, expanding healthcare services, making sure that people have access to insurance, regardless of whether or not they are documented or undocumented. We'll be working to end auto charging of youth. Kids are kids and should be treated and dealt with in a system meant for children. So that's something that we'll be working on with partners. Trying to remember the rest of the list. We'll be working on making sure that the police accountability boards that were established actually have the power to independently investigate misconduct complaints. There's a variety of issues that we work on, all of which I think really get at caring about other people and making sure that we're treating everyone with the dignity and dignity that they deserve. So I'm happy to talk more in depth and share more about the work that we're doing. If there's a particular issue that you're interested in, this sheet that I think many of you have in your hand lists some of those, not in great detail, but a little bit. And I think I'm going to turn it over to Jen about, and the one last thing that I'll say, which Jen is going to kind of go into a bit more, is that we do our work by organizing the Jewish community and working so we're organizing and then doing the advocacy work to make change. So Jen's gonna tell you all about that.
Thanks, everybody. Does this have sound now?
Yeah.
Okay, great. My name's Jen. Thanks for coming out. You're getting a piece of paper that looks intense, but what we're asking for here is hopefully your email address and something that you'd like to hear more about from us. If folks are not able to fill it out while you're here, folks online will get a link in the chat to the online version. And so we'll be also sending out a link to the same form online to everybody that registered for the event. So if we don't have your email address, please make sure we do so we can get back to you. But some of the options on here, there are several, and we can answer questions if folks have them. But some of the things that we're hoping people will be interested in are things like giving testimony, helping us plan events like this one, having folks, careful, participate in outreach for organizing. And, if you're not sure what you want to do yet, there's an opportunity to talk to a leader at JUFJ or an organizer, and we can kind of help figure out what you are interested in doing. Any questions about this? Not? I'm going to pass it to Jonathan, who is it's like a special place right here that works.
Hi, thank you, Dr. Lebovits, for coming tonight. We're really thrilled that you came. My friend Phil and we just met a couple months ago at a JUFJ event, and he told me that he would really like it if you would come speak to us. And what we were thinking about this event is that we would help to start make a space for Orthodox Jews in Northwest Baltimore, that we could have a place where we feel welcome. And I've been in Northwest Baltimore for 13 years, and I really have enjoyed getting involved with JUFJ lately, and we would like it if you could sign up if you're interested in hearing more about JUFJ and what it's like. I can tell you from my experience recently, I'd be happy to talk to anybody, any of my friends some of them might be on Zoom tonight. And we would really like this to be the beginning of a way that Orthodox Jews in Northwest Baltimore could participate more in JUFJ. And also, just in general, that we could feel comfortable being both frum and progressive. And it's not such a comfortable thing in as much as you might think it would be in this community. And I think JFJ can help us by being like an organization that we could be involved in together as Orthodox Jews, that would be a way that we could bring, say, like our understanding that we have of Judaism from being Orthodox, that we could help to bring that to JFJ, and that JFJ could help provide like a place, an organization for us here in Northwest Baltimore, where we can do like we can help organize with them, provide like our inspiration and our involvement to so I think it could be like in a way a partnership between this neighborhood and some of the people in it and JFJ, and I'd like to see that happen. Thank you.
Thank you all. Have a great evening.
Thank you.